Okay, so we know about adding odd and even numbers and what the results are. We know that if we add an even number to an even number, we get an even number. And we know that if we add an odd number to an odd number, we get an even number. And that if we add an even and an odd number, we get an odd number. But we haven't talked about multiplication. So let's use what we know about addition to find out why these multiplicative rules are true. So let's use some examples. Let's start off with an even number that we know. Let's say we're multiplying 4 times 6. Well, what does that mean in terms of repeated addition? It means that we're adding 4 6's together. So it's the same thing as saying 4 plus 6, 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. So we have we have 6 fours in total. So because we have an even number of fours, we can group them into pairs. And anytime we have pairs, we know that we're going to have an even number. What about an odd number times an even number? So let's try 3 times 4. So in terms of repeated addition, what does that mean? It means we have 4 3's. So once again, I'm adding 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. And once again, I can group them into pairs. So again, I've got an even product. What about even times odd? How about, let's try 4 times 5. So in terms of repeated addition, this is the same as writing 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. So I have an odd number of 4's, but I know that any time I add an even number to an even number, I get an even number. So no matter how many times I add 4 to itself, it's going to be even. Even if I group them into pairs and I say, oh, well, I've got 2 pairs of 4's and then one other 4, it doesn't matter because no matter how many times I add 4 to itself, I will get an even number. What about odd times odd? So let's try, let's say 3 times 5. What does that mean in terms of addition? It means I have 5 3's. So 3 added to itself 5 times. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. All right. So I know that when I add any number to itself, I get an even number. So this pair of 2 3's will make something even. And then again, I have a pair of 2 3's. So I know that this little product here is even. And I know that this product here is even. And then I'm adding one odd number. And I know that when an even number is added to an even number, I'm just going to write odd here. When an even number is added to an even number, I have an even number. So these two added together will make an even number. And then I'm adding an odd number. And as we already know, an even number plus an odd number makes an odd number. Now let's use what we just figured out in question number 6 to get the answer for question number 8. So explain why if n to the power of 37 is even, then n must be even. So what does that mean? They're telling us that n to the power of 37 is even. Does that mean that n also has to be even? What does this really mean? So what is n to the power of 37? n to the power of 37 means that n is multiplied by itself, multiplied to itself, or by itself, 37 times. So a whole bunch of times in between here, times n times n. So altogether, how many n's do I have? How many n's are there in total? Well, n to the power of 37 means that n is being multiplied by itself 37 times. So let's have a quick refresher here. What happens when we multiply an odd number by an odd number? We get an odd number. So let's experiment for a second. Let's try and see what happens if n is odd. Let's just see what happens. So if n is odd, we start off with an odd number, and then we multiply it by n once. And what do we get? An odd number. Then we multiply it by n once again. We get an odd number. And then we multiply it once again, an odd number by an odd number, and once again we get an odd number. So no matter how many times we multiply an odd number by itself, we will get an odd number. But we know that our product at the end is even. So that's impossible. N can't be odd. Let's make sure that it works if n is even. So we figured out that this is not working. Let's see what happens if n is even. So in that case, we would have an even number times an even number, or n times n. What happens when we multiply an even number by an even number? It's even. And then we would multiply it once again by n. We get an even number. And once again, we would multiply an even number by the next n, which is also even. And we get an even number. So you see, no matter how many times we multiply an even number by itself, the result is an even number. And because in this question, we're working with a power, so the number that is being multiplied is always the same. We never encounter a situation where we're multiplying an odd number times an even number. That's how we know that n has to be even.